everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Musings of Modern Mystics. My name is Lorelei Hewitt.
And I'm John Davis.
And it's just, today is, it's like October 30th, I think. So it's just tomorrow.
Or 29th.
The 29th, yeah. In a couple of days is Halloween. So John and I were talking a lot about this time of year, about how the veils get thin and the things that we're faced with. And we often ponder masks. I have a lot of masks on my wall at home, and you do too, don't you? They're very symbolic for us because we work with unmasking people's our created selves to get down to the self that the Creator made, and in other words, your true self. But
what was there, as the Zen master says, before you were all the things that you are now responsible for?
Yeah.
Who was that before? Your original face, as they say.
Yeah.
What's underneath the underneath? And there is a moment where we begin to think of those things as existential, like if you get too far underneath, you'll die.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, created to live a full life. We are created to be part of the flow of life itself in these bodies. But there is a thing that we are eventually going to die. Everybody does. Nobody, as some of my friends might say, makes it out of here alive.
Yep.
So honoring that with the Day of the Dead in all of these cultures all around the world, where we take a look at the thinness of the veil between life and death, and we honor it. We also take a look at, using Halloween as an example, the masks that we wear during the day. If you go out on a Halloween party, you'll see any number of doctors and nurses and ghouls and Barneys and various people from Star Wars. And a lot of these people, these are the myths that surround us in our daily life. And the thing is that we dress up in these things, but we sometimes miss the masks that we are wearing, because when we look in the mirror, we don't see them.
Yeah.
They're individual and invisible masks. And so what part of our healing work is, both of us, is there has to be a moment somewhere in your life, several moments, where you touch back into the ground floor of your being. And once you touch back into the ground floor of the being, you can come out again and be somebody's mother or somebody's husband or somebody's business partner or somebody's, mentor. You can do that. But you have to also be able to touch that ground floor and spring back into it, knowing that you have adopted these responsibilities and that's part of your mission in this life. At the same time, not to forget who you really are. And this day, this week, to honor the fact that there are many beings who have come before you, and you are one of that flow. You will die too, and in that thin veil, you can communicate with all of the other beings that have gone before you. You can be there with. Sometimes it's overwhelming, and as we can see from Halloween's, it's scary.
Yes. The masks that we wear originally were created in societies where they were basically hiding from death. In the Day of the Dead, the people will celebrate the skeletons that they find on the pyramids, and I don't know that they look at it as hiding from the dead, but I not consciously, but when I look at it, I think there is this aspect of that you don't want the dead to recognize you in your embodied self. You don't want the dead attaching to you, which is a belief that both John and I have, in terms of spirit attachments and spirit possessions, which is that kind of creepy topic that we all love to sort of sort of approach. It's scary. Death is scary. It's unknown. Even though, as a medium, I talk to people that are not here anymore, but it's still terrifying and magical and powerful. And it is the only thing, like you said, John, the only thing we can count on for sure is death. At least death of the body, not necessarily of the soul. So in the pagan traditions, people would wear masks, especially because they did not want to be recognized by the dead, by the relatives that were being brought in. Because at this time of year, we honor our relatives, we honor our ancestors, we honor the dead. According to my friend Lily in this talk that we did last weekend, which is on the Museum of Modern Mystics website, it got posted there, but she talked about how the dead they weren't honored specifically. Like, you wouldn't necessarily go after specific relatives to honor the way you might in the Catholic traditions or the Jewish traditions, but you would just honor the dead in general. Later, it became honoring of very specific ancestors with petals of flowers and things like that. In the Scandinavian countries, the dead are honored. You set out a plate of food for them. You invite them in. There are prayers and rituals that you may do, and you might say or not say. That will be a way to honor those dead and invite them to move on in their process. So you tell them, you know what, it's really not that great here. It's kind of hard. Thank you for your blessing. We want your blessing, but move on in the death process. Move on. But within some of those cultures, there were very elaborate things. I know in the Nordic tradition, there was the wild hunt that was celebrated, where you'd have these very windy, blustery days. The other day, it reminded me of the wild hunt, and the leaves are blowing, and it was thought that the gods were sort of ushering the souls that died that year, but had not actually crossed over. They hadn't processed their death completely, so they believed that the gods were hunting them, sort of herding them, ushering them to complete their death process. I don't know that much about we don't know that much about the Aztec beliefs in the ancestral honoring of the dead, but we do know that skeletons were involved. It's interesting that the Catholic Church, when they went in and they influenced the cultures that they colonized and conquered, there were certain traditions that they just could not eradicate. And
couldn't get rid of them.
Could not get rid of them. And ancestral worship, I don't know if worship is the right word, ancestral honoring was definitely the most powerful thing they could not eradicate. They could not get them to stop celebrating. It was so precious and so central to their core, their identification of who they are. So they incorporated those into their traditions. So they were forced to accept some of those traditions into their tradition in order to create a cohesive tradition that was acceptable to everybody. Right. But this time of year, it is like it's facing your death, facing your mask, facing who have I created myself to be. Sometimes when I look at the costumes that people dress up as, I think, is that really a mask, or is that more of like who you really are? You see these women coming out that are in offices, are very conservative in their dress. They come out at Halloween and like, whoa, who are you? Or this man that is really nice, he comes out as this like really this mass murderer, this like killer. I'm like, whoa. So you've got that inside you that you want to be able to express. Right. So being this Scorpio, your moon is in Scorpio, my sun is in Scorpio, that scorpionic energy, that hidden thing, it's like, sometimes I think the masks are more, in this time of year, more true to who people really are than their daily attire. You had a great Halloween party, I know. I remember that we were told to come as a part of yourself that no one ever sees. So
I went down to 3-day suit brokers and bought a suit and an attaché case. And I came as this sort of business person, this salesman with a mask. And then I remember that I was like, yeah, okay, so this is like, this part of me is like something that no one would ever see.
Yeah.
Then, and I remembered at 4 years old, my son, I said, it's Halloween. He goes, yes, I've been thinking about it. And I'm going, you have? What do you want to be? And he looks at me and he says, I want to be a barbarian.
A barbarian?
I mean, here's this sweet, little, intelligent 4-year-old who is like, who does everything right, and he wants to be a barbarian. So I had to ask him, I go, because I don't know anything about costume. I said, so what does a barbarian, what was a barbarian costume? What's the most important thing that we got to get for you? And he goes, fur underwear.
Fur underwear.
So it happened to be a Saturday, and it was garage sales. And so we went around, and we found this, like, fake fur that was on somebody's table. And then Laura sewed it to his underwear, and so he had fur underwear. So, but you look at him now, it's like, as a 40-year-old young man, it's like, so you funny. Go, fur underwear. Okay, you wanted to be a barbarian. Now you have a nice corporate job. You have a number of kids. You've got a regular house, but there was a barbarian inside there.
You know, some people, like my son Zach, he's probably going to watch this. I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about you, love. But my son, he's 25 now, and he always loved to be a vampire. Always loved to be a vampire.
Yeah.
And he liked the blood, but the glamour. You know, the fact that you could look cool, you could look handsome, you could look good, but yet behind that dangerous look was somebody that was deadly. And I think that even as a little boy, he was one of those kids that liked to face his demons. He loved to read scary books like Goosebumps over and over and over and over again. And I think it was a way for him to face his inner demons. He would like to face his fear, and he'd like to be able to show at Halloween, like, you know, I'm a nice guy, but there is something that's scary inside me. Don't mess with me. Yeah. And my other son is he's like, no, I don't want to look at those. You know, when he wanted to be things like a banana or a unicorn, I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of a male, like it's more like I think my son would be a fertility god. That's really what he was going for. But it's like you do see people's inner self come out. I always like to be a priestess or a goddess. I still have a hard time. I look at all these fairy things or whatever. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a high priestess. I'm going to staff. Right. I want like a crown. I want to be able to be this magical, powerful woman.
Well, yeah, because you see all these people who dress up in beautiful pantsuits for their work as a vice president of something.
Yeah.
And then they look like
the devil
hussies.
They'll be like the devil with this
or sex pots of some sort.
Yes.
It's like
what? Yep. But, you know, I always look at that. It's like, you know, there really is another aspect of that. It's like, why did they choose that costume? Yeah. And what are we hiding from inside ourselves that we're not expressing throughout the rest of the year? I think is a really good question to ask yourself. What kind of costume are you really drawn to? What is the mask that you're wearing on an everyday basis? Because let's face it, we have human bodies. We wear masks. We have to be polite. And I'm glad people do. I don't want people... To be honest, I don't want people to tell me what they think all the time. I hear it actually anyway.
I know. Once you're sensitive, like there's the downside is you hear
everything.
All this stuff.
You know everything. Yeah. It's really it's a little loud. So I appreciate people being respectful and just saying like, no, this is the way society expects you to behave and to dress and to look. Yeah. Because, you know, otherwise, I don't know, what would we be wearing if we were still on our past life Our last life, like what kind of clothes would you be walking around in today if you were still like, stuck in that?
And then you would be looking dead, and you would be wearing these clothes.
Yeah.
And so that would be your, so come as you were in a past life.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting Halloween
That would
party.
be a good Halloween party.
Right.
We should do that next year. What are you going to be in your, or maybe,
What are you going to be in your next
life?
Right.
Yeah, that would be good.
So we get back to the idea of the masks that we wear, and and say, because I remember there was a thing, was like someone said, if you had 90 days to go before you died, what would you do? And that's when people answered all kinds of things that made no sense given their current profession, given what they do. They would do these things. They would do the things that perhaps they dress up as on Halloween. So in other words, there's all these things that don't get expressed, that don't find an expression in the narrowness of our current personality that we've developed, that our wives, our husbands, our kids, our neighbors, and everything have come to know us as. And then there are these things that are underneath that, that are part of an unexpressed adventure. And when you ask somebody, well, if you knew you had 90 days to go and you're still pretty healthy and you're going to die at the end of 90 days, what would you do? You find an enormous majority of people would do something else.
Wow.
And so I thought that was interesting in terms of this
Yeah.
thing. And so Halloween and these things are an attempt to like get this stuff out and moving it through before the end. And because it's like, and so you look at that and you go, there's a lot of stuff in there, and yet in the narrow band of our personality as we come to know ourselves, there's something true about that. And at the same time, there are these unexpressed things that are underneath. And Halloween and Day of the Dead ceremonies gives us a chance to face death and to say, this is what I would be for a day.
Yeah. When I think about what starts right now is in the pagan traditions, they'll look at this is the darkest time of the year. I guess it's not really, because January and February is also very dark, but we know January and February that it's getting lighter. Right now we know it's still getting darker.
Right.
It's getting colder. We don't have a lot of sunshine and sunbathing to look forward to. So let's look at this. Let's look at the masks. Let's look at what we're hiding. Let's look at what is inside ourselves, and then it's as if next month we're like, okay, you know what? This is really intense. It's getting darker. Let's just remember to be filled with gratitude. So we have Thanksgiving, when we have feasts. Let's be filled with gratitude. And then it's still getting darker. We're like, okay, you know what? We need to party. Let's go. We need to have some celebrations to lighten up this dark days, and we'll give presents to each other to remind each other how much we appreciate each other. And then after all that, we're like, okay, now let's get down to business, because the sun's coming back. Yeah. It's coming back, and then we've got to move forward with things.
So after December 21st, when things start moving again, I mean, almost everybody in the world, indigenous cultures, had some celebration where it was like, okay, we've turned the corner, and 3 days after, we would have something. Now, the Christians took that over and made Christmas out of it, even though all the historical records seem to indicate that Jesus was born in the spring. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So they said, we've got to have a holiday there. And as you said in the very beginning about trying to get rid of the Day of the Dead, I always remember that in the Muslim tradition, Nowruz, which is celebrated all throughout Persia, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, and those places, that the Muslims couldn't get rid of that. That was a springtime festival. And it was like people just said, I can pray 5 times a day, but I'm celebrating Nowruz. And it's like the same thing happened, was that the dominant religion was unable to get rid of the indigenous religion's chief holiday.
Yeah.
And so I think that everything sort of begins to blend, where the dominant religion has to take on aspects of that, so that you have
Yeah.
within the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
you have a whole bunch of death things that before were not, part of the ceremony, but they had to adapt, because as they came across these cultures that refused to budge on a certain thing, they had to kind of go with that. So Day of the Dead became an important thing. In Peru, they would bring out the mummified bodies of whoever was the main person in their
wow.
family during that day. It was like they would have, Uncle George, who was a general in the army. They got him they keep him in the basement and in a refrigerated cabinet, and they would bring him out. And of course, the Spanish were just bananas about these people bringing out their dead relatives on a particular day, and they tried to get rid of that. And to some extent, they did. And there aren't that many basements anymore that have dead relatives in them. But they still do something where they Uncle George and Aunt Bee and whoever else, they have a ceremony where they recognize them, and the Spanish weren't able to get rid of all of that.
So Halloween, if you're not dressing up and going to a party or anything like that, or if you maybe did that already this weekend, but you might want to stop and go, what is my mask that I'm wearing? What is my true self? What are these different masks that I put on for the different roles that I have in my life? It doesn't mean that you shouldn't wear them, because I think actually they're quite appropriate. I need the mask of being a mom. I need the mask of being a healer. I need the mask of being a talk show person on the Museum of Modern Mystics.
Yes.
But there's something at the core of that transcends all of that. It's your true self. It's not your created self, but the self that the Creator made.
It's the maskless self.
Yeah, the maskless self. Yep.
Maybe we should have called this thing the maskless.
The maskless self. I think it's nice to contemplate that, and to be able to see each other for that, because as these masks go up and they come down, and you kind of wonder, who are you really? It's like, you did what at that party? You dressed up as what? Who are you really? It's a great question to ask, and it doesn't mean that there needs to be anything to be done about it, but I always think this stuff, it's good to notice it. It's good to know and to notice and to be aware of that and be very curious about it, because there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do when you're tapped into your true self. That's when the magic really starts. Yes, Kieran, who are you really? Like, who were you before you were born? Who will you be after you die? So
I have another thing too, which is write down all of the masks that you wear now. Just keep writing them down so you celebrate this time of the year, writing down all of the masks. Then, all of the masks that you wore in all the Halloweens that you've ever been in. And then, what other masks are there that you could wear that are part of some inside part of you? Because at some point, you will come to the end of all the ones that you can think of. And at that point, you begin to meditate on the maskless self. Yes, that's beautiful. So I think on that note, I think we're kind of complete with this conversation. Anyway, I'll just wave at Dana there. Thank you for everybody that did tune in and for watching this. It's a lot of fun. If you ever have a topic that you want us to discuss or that you're curious about, ping us on Facebook or text us. Let us know what it is that you'd like us to talk about, what you're curious about. Because we love talking. We both have Leo rising, so we're both we're really can do this.
We're good at talking. All right. Have an awesome day.
Awesome day.
Bye.